Most people believe that the third temple in Jerusalem will be built on the Temple Mount, either in place of or next to the Dome of the Rock. However, there are some people that believe the temple can or should be built elsewhere. This is an important topic because the rebuilding of the Jerusalem temple in the last days is a prerequisite for the second coming of the Lord. There is a small but growing group that believe they have identified another spot in Jerusalem where they believe the first and second temples originally were, and not on the Temple Mount. This is known as the City of David theory. The City of David is an area just south of the Temple Mount. During Christ's life, this was the poorer area of Jerusalem, but earlier, hundreds of years earlier, this was the heart of Jerusalem prior to the expansion in many areas and the building of walls to encompass the larger city. With the original City of David, archaeologists have found structural remains in Ophel, a small area between the City of David and the Temple Mount. Some believe that this area could have been the original location of the first and second temples. There are several reasons why some feel this could be a site of previous Jewish temples. First, due to ritual cleansing requirements for temple worship, a source of fresh water would have needed to be nearby. To this day, no fresh water is near the Temple Mount. But the Gihon Spring is quite near Ophel and could have been used for ritualistic purposes. Second, several passages in the Old Testament refer to the temple being in the City of David. 1 Kings 8:1 and 2 Chronicles 5:2 speak of the Ark of the Covenant that would be brought from the City of David, and we know that the Ark was kept in the Holy of Holies within the tabernacle, as the first temple was not yet built at that time. Or 1 Chronicles 15:1, which says, quote, "After David had constructed building for himself in the City of David, he prepared a place for the Ark of God and pitched a tent for it." Third, some proponents claim that archaeological findings in the City of David align with descriptions of the temple dimensions and layout. The reason some people are big supporters of the City of David theory is because if the third temple can be built somewhere other than the Temple Mount, it would dramatically reduce the tension between the Jews and the Muslims. It would also expedite the building of the third temple without conflict. It would also mean the temple could be built without destroying or moving the Muslim holy sites. But there are problems with the City of David theory. The archaeological findings are pretty weak and could be David's fortress or other buildings and not the temple. Proponents of this theory state that the Temple Mount was always the Antonia fortress, which doesn't match historical records. The passages of scriptures that refer to the City of David can also be misleading. While today the City of David is a small section of Jerusalem, in times past the entire city of Jerusalem, including all different areas within the walls, were often referred to as the, quote, City of David. In other words, Jerusalem and the City of David were synonymous historically, but in modern times the City of David is just one section of Jerusalem. The source of water with the Gihon Spring in Ophel and the lack of a source of water for the Temple Mount is probably the strongest evidence supporters of the City of David theory have, although the Pool of Bethesda isn't far away. However, there are many other reasons why the Temple Mount is likely the original locations of previous temples. For example, nearly all historical evidence and records affirm the placement of the first and second temples to be on the Temple Mount. Most every archaeologist and scholar agree the Temple Mount is the original site of King Solomon's temple, being the first temple, and Herod's temple, being the second temple. Roman records, not to mention the fallen stones around the Temple Mount, are evidence the Romans fulfilled Christ's prophecy in Matthew 24:2, where he said, quote, "There shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." Also, while Jews are actively excavating in and around Jerusalem, Palestinians do not allow any archaeology by anyone on or under the Temple Mount. Most archaeologists believe there could be a treasure trove of artifacts and relics and other historical valuable objects and information under the Temple Mount. Some might say that regardless of where the previous temples were, the third temple doesn't have to be at any particular location. It just needs to be within Jerusalem. Some members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for example, believe that perhaps the BYU Jerusalem Center, which is on the Mount of Olives just across from the Temple Mount, could be converted into a temple. But at this time we aren't allowed to proselyte, let alone build a temple. Others think a tent or a tabernacle could be quickly erected somewhere else in Jerusalem and be dedicated as the third temple. These theories are highly unlikely in my opinion. First, the Jews will be building the third temple, not Christians, and the Jews believe strongly that it needs to be built on the Temple Mount. Also, if you think about what would likely cause a horde of nations to come against Israel, it would be the taking of the Temple Mount and removing or destroying Muslim sacred sites. The desecration of the third most holy site on earth for Muslims is the leading reason why Armageddon will happen. Third, when Christ saves the Jews from Armageddon and splits the Mount of Olives, a spring of water breaks forth from under the temple. Half will flow east and heal the Dead Sea, while the other will flow west into the Mediterranean. The geography of Jerusalem makes this more likely to happen, as prophesied, if the spring is coming from the Temple Mount. Scripture references are another reason. For example, Ezekiel 40 through 48 describe the last days temple in great detail with walls, gates, stairs, porches, posts, windows, arches, different elevations of pavement and courts, etc. Scriptural descriptions are not describing a tent or tabernacle or any other existing structure. Lastly, I can't find any reference in Scripture where God takes a shortcut. We as mortals seem to want to do things on our timetables when and how we want. God doesn't ever seem to be in a hurry or cuts corners to make a prophecy come true. For God, it is always in the grand plan on His timetable. So my opinion is that the third temple will be built by the Jews on the Temple Mount. This could be built next to the Dome of the Rock or in place of it. Either way, events will transpire that will bring the Muslim nations down upon Israel in a great battle which Scripture calls Armageddon, which happens just prior to Christ saving the Jews, which event converts them to Christianity. But this is not the second coming in glory as many people think. That comes later after several other prophecies are fulfilled. To learn more about those, see my other videos, or my last days timeline. I'll put the links to some of these in the description below. Thanks for watching.